we spend way too much time with individuals, with sellers that actually have almost zero intention of selling unless they get their magical price. I was literally on the phone today with a guy who responded when I said, hey, would you be totally against selling your property? He said, yes, I'll be open to the idea of selling. He wanted $15 to $18 million was his exact words, okay? 15 to 18 million, which is a crazy range, by the way. I don't know who would ever say a range of $3 million when they're asking for for a sales price. And then I looked, and he bought the property for $1.5 million just a couple years ago. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this property was worth nowhere near $15 million. I'd literally sell my entire portfolio for a price per square foot that this guy was asking. So I was like, absolutely not. So these are the types of opportunities where too many people are spending too much time on them. And I want to give you my quick how to vet out these seller leads so you don't spend time with people who are not that motivated. And it has to do with understanding starter offers versus broker opinions of value, because so many people are like, oh, just like this individual, we'll call him Bob as an example. Bob said 15 million. The last thing I would ever do is go out and give Bob a broker opinion of value. What am I going to show him? A bunch of comps that his property is only worth, $2 to $3 million bucks, maybe at most. I mean, honest to God, I think his property is probably close to, $1.5 million to what he paid for it, 4 or 5 years ago. I think it's probably worth somewhere near there, okay? So the fact that he's even at a $15 million number, we need to read between the lines here. Clearly, he's just not that motivated. And if you were to send him a broker opinion of value of all these different comps in the market, who cares? The guy's not interested in selling. It's not like he goes, yeah, look, we've been thinking about selling. We're interested in selling. This is something that we planned on doing anyways. I appreciate you reaching out. Like, it's not like the conversation went that positively. It was just one of those things of, hey, if you got me by, my right number, my magic number, I'd consider it. So what's important here is to say, like, okay, what else can we be doing in this moment? How else can we begin the negotiation process? How else can we look at this deal? What lens can we look at this deal through where maybe we can figure out what's going on? Now, obviously, the example I gave you with Bob and wanting 15 million bucks when it's only worth $1.5 million, that 10x difference is not the usual. Typically, what will even happen is the seller says, yeah, I'm open to the idea of selling. I want 3 million and I think it's worth maybe $1.5 million. And most people will still send them broker price opinions. So what I do differently than the corporate America thinking brokers is that I'm sending them a starter offer right away. I'm already going to start negotiating this deal immediately, because what I'm trying to do is gauge the motivation of this individual. I don't need to just send them comps. Comps don't really do a heck of a lot, because in their mind, all you're doing, like if you just send them a bunch of comps saying, hey, I think your property's worth in this range, you can do that in addition to sending an offer. But most of the time, these people want to see an offer. Every single time you talk to somebody, hey, would you be totally against selling? They're all like, okay, yeah, give me an offer. Every time we hear this. This happens all the freaking time. And when you say, like, well, look, I'm a broker. Let me send you some comps. These people aren't stupid, right? Like, they probably have a broker who brought them the deal. If they wanted comps for their property, they can literally call up the broker who found them the deal, and they can get comps for any property. So I'm talking about, how do you start the conversation on a different note? How do you start off the conversation after you got all the information from them, right? Just like you would as a broker, collecting data and information on their property. And then I like to submit an offer on the property. We do this all verbally, and we verbalize an offer to them. Okay, we don't put it in writing until they request it. But for specifically the first offer, every offer after the very first verbal offer, we'll put into a letter of intent format and we'll send it over. Obviously, we'll include things like proof of funds or a term sheet if required, if they ask for it, but we don't need it. So what's important is to shift the mindset, where every time you get a lead now, I want you to think about it. The next conversation you have with them, okay, is going to be about verbalizing an offer of some sort to them. Now, some of you are going to be like, well, I don't have a buyer. Well, that's a fair statement. And a lot of the times, most people wouldn't have a buyer for every type of asset class either, or every type of property. But what you can do is that if you learn how to underwrite, if you learn and you spend the time and you invest in your education around underwriting, and you master the art of underwriting properties, even if you only have a little bit of information, you can evaluate assets based on what they currently could be valued at, based on what you're going to receive information-wise. And you will be able to submit an offer. Just like, look, Ben Malla was just even on like the Iced Coffee Hour with Graham Stephan, and he talks about how he's lowballing all these different owners. Okay, and obviously he goes after actively listed properties. We do the same thing, but off market. So we're direct to seller, direct to buyer, and to pre-negotiate, we send over and verbalize an offer. If Ben Malla, a beast of an investor, he's the absolute man. I love his content. It's like, if this guy's doing it, Don't you think every investor in the marketplace is probably doing the same thing? Like, so if Blackstone gave you a call or Ben gave you a call and said, "Hey, I know the property you have listed is at 10 million, but I want to offer $6.5 million," would you not write it up? The answer is you would 100% of the time. But all I'm suggesting is you do it without the necessary requirement of having Ben or Blackstone or whoever you're speaking with, these investors, right, actually telling you that they would offer that number. Because if you know how to evaluate property and you know that it's worth around 6.5, 7, 7.5, $8 million, in this example, submitting an offer at $6 million and verbalizing an offer at $6 million, knowing full and well that I can get an offer for 6.5, 7, 7.5, 8, that's where the magic is. Because what I'm going to do is I'm pre-negotiating with this seller to vet out the people who are not that interested. Because if I offer this guy $6 million, knowing that I can get 6.5, 7 from an investor, and this guy says, "I'm absolutely not interested in selling at anything less than 10 million. Don't call me back unless you have 10 million. Here's the thing. If you try to go down the path with this individual, whether you're sending them broker price, opinion of values, the appraisal strategy, whatever you want to call it, if you do that, you're going down a path with an investor, with a seller. You're going down a path with a seller who's just not that motivated if you read between the lines. It's like we're like faking the idea of like, "Oh my God, I have this amazing client. I have this amazing opportunity." That's not what this is about. What this is about is understanding when you actually have a good opportunity in front of you. And the only way to know is when you know the intrinsic value of this asset, you know roughly where a buyer would pay, and trying to get the best deal possible where you'll transact, right? That's what we want. We want to be able to transact on these pieces of real estate. And I don't care, like we just had an agent of ours come across a deal for $160 million, okay? $160 million portfolio. He's a 20-something-year-old kid, a powerhouse of a guy. And he finds this opportunity for $160 million. Seller says, I want $160 million bucks. And guess what? Normal brokers would be like ecstatic beyond belief. "Oh my God, honey, I just got this opportunity, $160 million. I'm going to be rich. Oh my goodness," right? Like, beating their chest, thinking that they got this amazing opportunity. But guess what? We know these types of asset classes well. We knew the intrinsic value was roughly somewhere between 100 and 120 million. They had $100 million worth of debt. Okay. They were trying to sell this portfolio for like a 5 cap, and it was a lot of office. Okay. 160 was like a 5 cap. For a lot of office and a little bit of retail. And guess what? We knew a couple of buyers in the marketplace who would be interested in this type of asset class. And every conversation we had with them, they wanted to make an offer between $105 and $115 million. Okay. So what happens in these circumstances, obviously, my agent, who's, incredibly well trained, has been with us for a long time, follows our approach. As soon as he got it, he's like, "Listen, I know this is overpriced. I actually already had a conversation with one of our buyers. They wanted to come in at an offer of 105 to start." And I was like, "Fantastic. Let's rip an offer at 105. Let's, add a 5 or 6% commission. Doesn't really matter. And let's send it. And let's see what happens." Because all we're trying to do is start the negotiation process and see, is this an actual opportunity, a real opportunity or not? Because if it's not a real opportunity, I don't need to spend much time with this guy, right? We're trying to filter out the crap, right? I'm trying to filter out the sellers who have actually no interest in selling. So what that allows us to do is that allows us to be nimble in the marketplace. Because while all these other brokers are spending unreasonable amount of time with sellers who aren't actually true sellers, we are bobbing and weaving and moving through the environment of sellers, right? There's all these opportunities that are all around us, and I'm just going to hold on to those real sellers. Because if it's a real seller, you can take a listing and sell it. You could do an off-market deal and sell it. You could raise money to buy the deal, or you could wholesale it and make money. But if there's not a clear path to success and there's not a clear path to a transaction, I don't need to spend endless amounts of time figuring that out. All I'm trying to support you guys in looking at is how can I go from first conversation with the seller to understanding and recognizing, is this something that's going to transact or not? And I want to do that as fast as freaking possible. Because the faster I know, is this something that's going to transact or not? Same thing with your buyers, okay? Is this someone who's actually going to transact or not, right? Are they vetted? Good conversation? Did you vet them out a little bit? And then, knowing, is this an investor who's actually going to make real, legitimate, true, strong offers where you have the ability to transact? I want to just go from first conversation to knowing are we going to transact as fast as freaking possible. That's the whole purpose I'm trying to explain. And way too many people spend too much time, whether it's with a seller or with a buyer, who's not going to actually transact. And they just get all giddy because the price point is some crazy number that they're excited about. I love when I talk to people and they're like, yeah, I'm working on a $50 million deal. I'm working on a $10 million deal. I'm working on a $100 million deal. I'm like, define what you mean by working on it. Does that mean you just had one conversation with a seller? Like, what does that even mean? I'm working on. It doesn't even mean anything. It's like every week my team is getting, between $5 and $15 million worth of accepted offers, right? That means a buyer and a seller have agreed on a letter of intent with terms that they're putting to the attorneys. I don't care that you're working on a $50 million deal. Good for you. We burn insurance singles all day long. That's what our business is about. Obviously every now and again we get a nice deal. Like just on the phone with a guy, we're trying to put together a deal for about $10.5 million. Who cares? Like, again, the I'm working on doesn't mean shit to me. Like, to me, when I say I'm working on something, it means that I literally have a buyer who's, got a price that's very close to what the seller's at, and we're just working on the final details. That to me might mean working on it, but it's about understanding. Is this a real seller? And is this a real buyer? And can we put something together fast? That's what we want. We want to stop wasting time. And that's why sending out a broker opinion of value versus actually setting out or verbalizing a starting offer is a drastically different strategy. So instead of the brokers who are taking endless amounts of, it was so funny. I don't go on Twitter much. I don't use social media much, but I was on Twitter and I literally saw this guy post because I was looking for something on my Twitter account. And I saw this guy post, as a commercial real estate agent. He's like, I've been spending all weekend, like 15 hours on my weekend, putting together proposals for a seller, right? Or for multiple sellers that they have coming out this week. What a silly way to spend your weekend. What an absolute silly way. You would have made more money if all you did was that you reached out to those 7 sellers in a period of 30 minutes, okay, because they're probably not all going to answer you, and just reach out to them and verbalized an offer at a price range that you felt like was fair and reasonable, that you knew you can get a buyer for all day long and twice on a Sunday. You would have had infinitely better results, because what you'd be doing is that you'd be vetting out the true sellers and vetting and getting rid of the sellers that are not that interested in selling. Instead of you now building these proposals, these PDFs, these documents, and talk about how wonderful you are, right? When they don't really care. It's like, again, I own real estate, and if you came to me and sending me a proposal, I don't give a shit who you are or what brokerage you are. Do you have buyers who are interested in buying my property? Have you transacted this asset class before? Show me what you've sold. Who was the buyer? Because if he bought as an example, if I owned a multifamily property in X town, what have you sold in X town? Who do you have that buys in X town? And what price per unit did they pay? Same thing with retail or industrial. I own in X town. What have you sold in my town? And what price point, what price per square foot, or what cap rate did they pay? Because if you're like, hey, I've got wonderful buyers. I got a bunch of multifamily guys. They buy 10 caps. Absolutely not. I'm not having a conversation with you. But if you can show me, hey, I've got a bunch of guys, they bought between 5 and 7 caps in X markets. Great, I want to talk to them. I'm interested in getting to know you. I want to know who your 5 cap and 6 cap buyers are. But this is why it's so freaking important. Like, the proposals don't mean a lot, guys. They don't mean a lot. I would rather you say, hey, Henry, you gave me the information I needed. I already have it prepared on every property I own, because I get calls all the freaking time. I go, here's my information. Here's my P&L. Here's my rent roll. Here are my copies of leases, or a templated copy of a lease, so you can see how they're set up. If you happen to have a buyer who's willing to pay me my price, and I'll just give them my number, right? This is what I will accept. You can pay yourself whatever you want on top. I don't care. This is what I'll sign. Have a nice day. And if you come back to me with an offer of that price, I'm going to sign it. I don't need to give you an exclusive listing. It doesn't mean anything, because an exclusive listing to me means you don't have a buyer. Because if you had a buyer, you just would bring them to the property. Let's schedule a tour. I'm open to scheduling a tour. Any property owner would probably be who's interested in actually selling, and you had a real legitimate buyer, and you could, if they ask for proof of funds or NDAs or whatever, you got all that stuff handled, and you could schedule a tour. Any buyer, any seller would be open to the idea of doing that. You don't need an exclusive. But it's like brokers care about getting exclusives because they want a sign in the ground. They want proof that they're capable of possibly, maybe bringing a buyer to the table. Why can't the proof just be you selling properties? What is the point of having an exclusive listing? You're going to post it on LoopNet or CoStar? Whoop-de-do. It doesn't mean anything. It means absolutely nothing to me. What is important is, how many offers can you bring me? And how fast can you do it? I don't have all day. And if I'm going to give you an exclusive listing, you better have a ton of freaking buyers who are going to bring me offers immediately, which is why I'm like, hey, I'll give you 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks. That's all I need. If you gave me a 2-week listing, I would probably get between 5 and 10 offers on any property I listed. Period. End of story. Even if I don't have a buyer right now. Because I can find a buyer in any marketplace, any asset class, period, all around the country. And if I can't find a buyer, I can make them an offer, period, based on my own ability, right? So no matter what, I will be able to get them some offers. And there's not enough brokers out there who are thinking in that lens. It's too many of them like, oh, well, I'll put it on the market and eventually somebody will probably have a buyer. Somebody will bring me a buyer. I don't need to have one. Because remember, all we're trying to do is we're trying to sift out the real sellers and the not real sellers. That's the whole purpose of verbalizing a starting offer. And everyone always goes like, oh, well, what if you offend them? Offend? What do you mean offend? It's a number on a piece of paper. I didn't call you a slur, right? It's like, come on, we're talking about, I offered you $1 million for a property you want $20 million for. I didn't offend. There's no offense here, okay? It's like I've been bullied when I was younger, okay? Like I've been called multiple things. It's like, okay, like I know what offensive is, okay? I've been called everything you could possibly imagine when I was younger. So it's like, for you to say, quote, I don't want to offend them, number one, grow up and be a professional. Because if I said, hey, I have Blackstone on the phone, or I just spoke to Blackstone and Blackstone wanted to offer you $10 million for your property, and they said they wanted 20, I don't think they're going to say that's offensive. Right? Because every single one of you in this room or anybody watching right now, you would 100% write up that letter of intent. You would 100% verbalize that offer if that's the case. But what you're not doing is you're not verbalizing the offer anyways. That is the mistake that I want you all to hear.